People think that when someone gets lost in the mountains, the biggest threats are the cold, hunger, or wild animals. I used to think so too, but after what happened to me last fall, my perspective completely changed. Because sometimes, the thing that wants to kill you in the mountains is neither an animal nor a human. The most terrifying part is that it follows you without rushing, memorizes your path, and only reveals itself the moment you are left alone. After this incident, I never went hiking alone again, and no matter how much money I were offered, I would never return to that mountain. My name is Ethan Morris. This incident took place in October 2022 in Colorado. I was 28 years old at the time, and hiking on weekends was one of my biggest hobbies. On this trip, I had two friends with me, my childhood friend Ryan and his coworker Alex. It was my first time meeting Alex. He was also an experienced hiker and said he knew the area well. Our plan was simple. We would set off early on Saturday morning, hike for about 6 hours, spend the night by a small lake located at the foot of the mountain, and return on Sunday. The weather forecast looked perfect. No rain was expected, the wind was weak, and the temperature wouldn't drop below freezing at night. We started our hike at 7 in the morning. The first 3 hours went normally. The trail was clearly visible, there were enough trail markers, and occasionally we encountered other hikers. Toward midday, however, we stopped running into people. Alex said this was normal because most people didn't stray from the main route. Around 2 o'clock, we saw an old wooden sign. The writing on the sign was almost completely erased. Only one sentence was legible: "Turn back before sunset." Ryan smiled and said it was written to scare tourists. I agreed. Alex, however, said nothing. He stared at the sign for a few seconds, then averted his eyes and continued on his way. I found this strange but didn't ask. About half an hour later, the trail began to narrow. The trees grew dense and our phones completely lost signal. Alex was walking in front. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly and began looking at the ground. I approached and asked what was wrong. He didn't answer. He just pointed at the ground. There were 3 pairs of footprints. One was mine, one was Ryan, and one was Alex's. The problem was, these tracks were coming from ahead of us, as if, a few minutes ago, we had walked back along the same path, yet we were passing through this direction for the first time. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The 3 of us stared at the footprints in the dirt. I compared the pattern on the bottom of my boot with those tracks. They were completely identical. Ryan also placed his foot over one of the prints and immediately pulled it back. The size, the shape, even the tiny scratch on the heel section matched perfectly. Alex looked anxious for the first time. He said in a low voice that there must be an explanation, that maybe these tracks were left over from yesterday. But the ground was still damp, and the edges of the tracks hadn't collapsed. They looked as if they had been made an hour ago at most. Ryan tried to laugh and said that maybe we had walked in a circle. I immediately objected. The trail behind us was completely straight. Moreover, the large rock, the broken bridge, and the old pine tree we had passed along the way were still left behind us. It was impossible for us to have circled around. Alex, saying nothing, pulled his GPS device out of his backpack. He waited a few seconds, then frowned. The coordinates were visible on the screen, but the map itself was completely blank. It was as if the device didn't recognize the area we were in. We still continued on our way. About 20 minutes later, the forest thinned out and a small clearing appeared before us. In the middle of it stood an old wooden bench. When we reached the bench, I froze. A green water bottle was sitting on top of it. My name was written on the bottle's cap with a black marker. ETHA, and I picked up the bottle. It was mine. The water bottle I thought I had forgotten in the car this morning. When Ryan saw this, he laughed. So we really did walk in a circle. But I shook my head. No. What do you mean, no? I forgot this bottle in the car. Alex slowly took the bottle from my hand. He looked at the bottom, then his face turned pale. Just one sentence was scratched with a knife onto the bottom of the bottle. Follow Alex. At first, I thought it was Ryan's prank, but Ryan was seeing the writing for the first time too. Alex got angry. Did you guys do this? Both of us said no at the same time. He looked at us for a few seconds, then he threw the bottle to the ground. Don't like someone tracking us, I agreed, but something even stranger caught my attention. The outside of the bottle was still ice cold, as if it had been placed there just a few minutes ago. Right at that moment, from afar, not a whistle, but a human scream was heard. The sound was coming from the lower part of the mountain from very far away, but one word was clearly distinguishable. Immediately stood up. This was Ryan's voice, but Ryan was standing right next to me. The two of us looked at Alex at the same time. Alex's face suddenly went white, because another scream came from below, this time. Ryan, and this was my voice. Ryan and I looked in the direction of the sound at the same time. The inside of the valley below was covered in thick fog, and it was impossible to see further than 10 meters through the trees. Despite this, the scream came so clearly that it felt as if the person calling us was standing just a few meters below. Alex suddenly grabbed my arm. His fingers were ice cold. "No one is going down," he said. I asked him the reason for this. He didn't answer. He just kept his eyes fixed on the valley. A few seconds later, the sound came again, this time. Alex. This voice was Alex's own voice. None of the three of us were talking anymore because each of us from below was hearing our own voice. Ryan said in a low voice, "This is impossible." Alex took a deep breath and for the first time told us something he hadn't mentioned before. He confessed that he had been on this trail once before. About 6 years ago, he hiked the same route with 3 other friends, but they never managed to reach the lake. Before night fell, they decided to head back. That night, one of their friends vanished. Even though the police searched for days, they couldn't find him. I got angry. "Why didn't you say this from the start?" Alex lowered his head. "Because I thought it was just a coincidence too." Right at that moment, the sound of a snapping branch came from behind us. The three of us turned around at the same time. The trail was empty. No one was in sight, but on the ground, new footprints were forming as we watched. The prints appeared one by one. It was as if someone invisible was walking toward us. One print, then another, then one more. The dirt sank inward with every step, but there was no one there. Ryan slowly backed away. I followed after him. Alex, however, was frozen in place. The tracks stopped in front of him. Then they began to circle around Alex, as if an invisible thing was sniffing him. Suddenly, Alex screamed, "Run!" We started running. Footsteps were coming from behind, but only the three of us were running. Despite this, the footsteps of a fourth person could also be clearly heard. Thud. Thud, thud, thud. For a brief moment, I even wanted to turn and look, but Ryan looked back. After running for about 5 minutes, we stopped to catch our breath. Alex was gone. I thought he had fallen behind. Ryan started looking around too. Then the two of us saw the same thing on the ground. There were only the footprints of 2 people, mine and Ryan's. Alex's tracks. Right in the middle of the path we were running along, abruptly cut off as if, while he was walking, he had lifted up into the air. I knelt down where Alex's tracks ended and began looking closely at the ground. Everything looked completely normal. There were no drag marks, no blood, no signs of a struggle. The footprints simply continued to a certain point and then suddenly vanished. It was as if he had taken a step and his next step never touched the ground. Ryan called out his name with a trembling voice. No answer came. He shouted again. The forest only echoed our own voices back. We searched for Alex for a few minutes. We looked behind every nearby bush, went to the edge of the valley, but we couldn't find anything. I pulled out my phone. There was still no signal. I opened the compass app. The needle pointed north at first, then slowly began to spin, and it didn't stop for an entire minute. When Ryan saw this, he went into an outright panic. He said we had to go back immediately. I agreed. We started running back along the trail we came from. About 20 minutes later, we came out by that same wooden bench again. I froze in my tracks because we had run in the straight direction. It was impossible for us to have circled around, but the bench was in front of us again. This time the water bottle was not on top of it. Instead, an old backpack was sitting there. Ryan cautiously approached and unzipped it. Inside were old food containers, a rusted flashlight, and a torn map. Then he found a small leather wallet. A driver's license came out from inside. The man in the picture was Alex, but the date of birth, 1987, and the issue date of the license was the year 2010. Ryan said in confusion, "This is impossible," because the Alex next to us had told us he was 32 years old. According to this license, though, he should have been 35. Even stranger, the back of the license was stamped missing person. My heart sank when I saw this. Right at that very moment, a low voice came from behind us. "Did you find it?" The two of us turned around. Alex was standing there, but something had changed. His face looked paler than before, and his clothes were completely dry even though we had gotten wet from the rain while running when Ryan wanted to walk toward him. Alex smiled. I had never seen that kind of smile on a human face before. Then he said in a calm voice, "I didn't go anywhere." Right at that moment, I looked at the driver's license in Ryan's hand. The man in the picture no longer looked like Alex in the photo. Was me. Ryan's hands also began to shake when he looked at the license. He extended the license to me, but I didn't dare to take it. A few seconds ago, we had seen Alex in the photo. Now my picture was on the same document. The name section had changed too. Now it read ETHANMORRIS. My date of birth was correct as well. It was as if that license had always belonged to me. Ryan anxiously rubbed his eyes and looked again. It was the same this time too. Alex was looking at us calmly, and the smile on his face was growing wider and wider. I backed away. Ryan grabbed my arm. The moment we heard this word, both of us started running with all our might. No footsteps came from behind, nor any screams. This silence terrified me even more. After running without stopping for about half an hour, we saw the asphalt road for the first time. At that moment, it felt as if a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders. A park service car was parked by the side of the road. 2 rangers were sitting inside. As soon as they saw us, they got out of the car, forcing our breath. We tried to explain what had happened. We spoke of Alex. We said he was lost. The rangers looked at each other, then they asked us, "Who is Alex?" Ryan got angry. "Friend who came with us." One of them pulled out his tablet and looked at the registration list. Then he said in a calm voice, "Only 2 people entered the park this morning." I objected. "No, there were 3 of us." Ranger shook his head. "We also looked at the security camera of the car. Only you and your friend are visible inside." At that moment, my blood ran cold. When we returned to the car, we saw it ourselves in the camera footage. The entire way, indeed. There were only Ryan and I. Alex had not appeared in a single frame. The police didn't believe it. They searched the area for a few days. Nothing was found. I, however, did not want to close this case. After returning home, I started researching old missing person reports on the internet. About 3 hours later, I found a small local newspaper story from 2010. The headline read, "Experienced hiker Alex Turner missing after solo mountain trip." My breath caught when I saw the picture in the article. This was the Alex who came with us, and the date of the news belonged to 12 years ago. His body had never been found. I couldn't sleep for a single minute that night. Toward morning, a picture came to my phone from an unknown number. In the photo, that old wooden sign was visible. The writing we had read before was not on it. This time there was only one sentence on the sign: "Thank you for bringing him back." I called the sending number. The number did not exist. I wanted to show the picture to the police, but in my phone's gallery, that picture was no longer there. 2 years have passed since this incident. Ryan doesn't want to talk about this topic. As for me, I still wake up sometimes at night to the same sound. Someone is knocking very quietly behind my door 3 times, then a familiar male voice is heard. "Ethan, are you ready for the next hike?" I never answer anymore, because some mountains don't lose people, they just take them back when the time comes. People say that when you get lost in the mountains, you should always follow the trail. I used to believe that too, but during one hike I came across a second trail. The interesting thing was that this trail was neither on the map nor visible in satellite imagery. Despite this, there were hundreds of fresh footprints on the dirt. The most terrifying part was that none of those footprints returned. My name is Adam Walker. This incident took place in September 2021 in Washington State. My cousin Tyler and I had been going on mountain hikes together for many years. That weekend, we chose an old route that tourists didn't visit often. Our goal wasn't to climb the mountain peak, but to find an old stone bridge located deep within the forest. This bridge had already been erased from official maps, but various stories about it were circulating on internet forums. We started our hike at 8 in the morning. The first 2 hours went smoothly. The weather was clear, the trail was clearly visible, and along the way we encountered other hikers. Toward midday, however, the forest grew dense and the surroundings became completely quiet. Tyler said this was normal. I agreed. Around 1 o'clock, we reached the old stone bridge. The bridge was in better condition than we expected. We took a few pictures there and stopped to have lunch. While eating, a narrow trail on the other side of the river caught my attention. The interesting thing was that this trail was not on our map. Tyler thought at first that it was an animal path, but when we approached, we saw footprints in the dirt. A lot of footprints, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were all going in the same direction. None of them returned. When Tyler saw this, he said jokingly, "I hope they are still out there." I laughed, but for some reason, a very bad feeling had formed inside me. Even though Tyler joked, I couldn't take my eyes off that trail. The footprints looked truly strange. They were all going in the same direction, and the dirt was packed so tightly that it felt as if hundreds of people had passed through here over many years. But there wasn't a single returning track. I tried to explain it rationally. Maybe people returned via another route. Maybe this trail was circular. Yet no matter how many times we looked at the map, no path was shown in that direction. Tyler pulled his compass out of his backpack. The needle pointed north at first, then suddenly spun to the west. It spun continuously for a few seconds and finally returned to the north. Trying to smile, he said the compass was broken. At the same time, I opened the compass on my phone. It was doing the exact same thing. We looked at each other then. Curiosity won again. We began advancing along the trail. At first, everything was normal. The narrow path passed through dense pine trees. About 10 minutes later, we saw the first strange thing by the side of the road, an old hiking backpack. It was completely covered in mud. Its zipper was left open. Inside were canned food, a rusted knife, and a soaked journal. Tyler picked up the journal and flipped through the pages. Most of the pages were illegible, but the last page was intact. Only one sentence was written there. "If the trail begins to widen, it is already too late to turn back." I asked what this sentence meant. Tyler shrugged. "It's probably some stupid joke." We put the journal back and continued on our way. About 5 minutes later, I stopped suddenly. Tyler asked why I had stopped. Without answering, I pointed to the path. The trail had become twice as wide as before. We hadn't noticed it happening, but the trees already appeared further away from us. It was as if the path was slowly growing. Tyler looked back. The section behind us was still as narrow as before. We looked ahead. There, the trail was widening even further. Neither of us could explain this right at that moment. From afar, not a whistle, but the sound of applause was heard. It wasn't just one person clapping. Dozens of people were clapping at the same time. The sound was coming from the depths of the forest, but it was strange. The applause wasn't rhythmic. Everyone was clapping at different times, as if hundreds of people were seeing us. But we couldn't see them. Tyler whispered, "Adam, I think we should go back." I immediately agreed. We turned around, but the trail behind us was no longer there. In its place stretched a dense, impassable forest. Seeing that the trail behind us had vanished, both of us froze in place for a few seconds. I closed my eyes and opened them again, thinking it was an illusion caused by fatigue. But the scenery didn't change. Behind us were only dense pine trees, thorny bushes, and impassable rocks. The path we had come from just 10 minutes ago seemed as if it had never existed. Angrily, Tyler pulled out his GPS device. The coordinates were visible on the screen, but the flashing dot on the map wasn't on any road. It was as if we were standing in an area that had been erased from the map. I tried to stay calm and told Tyler not to panic. Our plan was simple. We would advance along the continuation of the trail, try to turn right at the first suitable spot, and make our way back to the main route. We didn't have any other choice anyway. We walked in silence for about 5 minutes. The sounds of applause had stopped by now. A strange hum had taken their place. It felt as if hundreds of people were whispering at the same time far away, but it was impossible to distinguish the words they were saying. Suddenly, Tyler stopped again. He pointed to a tree ahead. Large letters were carved into the tree trunk with a knife. "Answer them." The writing felt fresh. Wood shavings were still scattered on the ground. I placed my hand over the inscription. The wood was warm, as if someone had written it just a few minutes ago, yet no one was visible around. Tyler said in a low voice, "We are not alone." Before I had a chance to reply, a man's voice came from behind us. "Hey," both of us startled. The voice was very close. It was coming from about 10 meters behind, but there was no path behind us, only dense forest. The man called out again, "Please, I'm lost." Instinctively, Tyler wanted to answer. I grabbed his arm. I remembered the writing on the tree. Answer THEM. A few seconds passed. Then the man's voice spoke again. This time, it said my name. Adam. My heart pounded against my chest. I hadn't told anyone my name in this forest. Tyler looked at me in fear. Then the voice called his name. Tyler. The voice was no longer alone. A second voice was heard, then a third, within a few seconds. From every direction of the forest, people began calling us by our names. None of them were shouting. They were all speaking in calm voices, as if very old friends were calling us home. Tyler covered his ears with his hands. I can't take this anymore. Right at that moment, at the end of the trail, we saw a person for the first time. He was standing about 50 meters away. He was facing us. He was wearing an orange rescue vest. He held a flashlight in his hand. Waving his hand, he shouted, "I'm here. Come quickly." I wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, but then the light of the flashlight fell upon his face, and I saw that he had no face. The light of the flashlight stayed on that figure for a few seconds. At first, I thought I couldn't distinguish his features because the distance was too far. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I understood the terrifying truth. He had a head, he had hair, and his ears were visible too. It was just that the place where his face should have been was completely smooth. No eyes, no nose, no mouth could be distinguished. Despite this, his voice was heard as clearly as before. "Hurry up." Tyler was barely catching his breath. Whispering, he said that it was impossible for this to be a human. I was of the same opinion. The figure stood there without moving. The flashlight in his hand swung slowly from side to side. Then he took a step back, followed by another step. It was as if he wanted to lead us after him. I didn't move from my spot, neither did Tyler. As if sensing this, the figure tilted his head slightly to the side. Then he turned his back and began walking into the dense forest. The light of the flashlight grew smaller and smaller among the trees. Finally, it vanished completely. We were still standing in our tracks. Suddenly, the phone in my pocket vibrated. With astonishment, I pulled it out. There had been no signal for hours. But now, a message had arrived. There was no number in the sender section. It just read, "Trail service." I opened the message. There was only one sentence there. "Follow the rescuer." Tyler saw the screen too. I couldn't understand how the message had arrived. There was still no signal. A few seconds later, the phone vibrated again. A second message arrived. This time it read, "He isn't the first one." While I was looking at the screen, the phone's camera opened by itself. The front camera was running. Tyler and I appeared on the screen, and behind us stood a third man. I turned around immediately. There was no one behind us. I looked at the phone again. The man was still there. He was very tall. He lowered his head, looking down at us. Then, slowly, he raised his right hand and touched Tyler's shoulder. Tyler suddenly screamed because he said that at the exact same moment he felt an ice-cold hand on his shoulder. The phone fell from my hand to the ground. The screen shattered, but it didn't turn off. Inside the broken screen, that tall figure was still visible, and this time, he looked at me and smiled slowly, even though he too had no face. After the phone fell to the ground, I didn't even dare to pick it up. Tyler grabbed me by the arm and shouted, "Run!" There was no time to think anymore. Both of us started running along the trail with all our might. No footsteps came from behind, nor did any branches snap. This was the scariest part. It was as if nothing was chasing us, yet every second I felt someone's breath on the back of my neck. We ran without stopping for about 10 minutes. Then daylight began to appear through the trees. The old stone bridge appeared before us again. When I saw the bridge, I breathed with hope for the first time. This meant we had returned to the main route. As soon as we crossed the bridge, a signal came to my phone. At the same moment, Tyler's phone vibrated too. Both of us thought this was over. But right at that moment, a third message appeared on my phone. The sender was missing again. Only one sentence was written in the message. Only 2 left. I showed this to Tyler. He froze in his tracks too because there was a completely different message on his phone. Only 1 left. We looked at each other. We didn't understand anything. When we reached the park exit, 2 forest rangers stopped us. They asked why we had returned so late. I began to tell them what had happened to us. I spoke of the trail that wasn't on the map, the strange messages, the faceless rescuer, and the voices we heard inside the forest. They listened carefully. Then they asked us, "Where is the third person?" I was confused. "Third person?" "Yes. On the security camera, a third person is coming out of the forest right behind you. I laughed. There were only the two of us the entire way. Saying nothing, the ranger took us to the security room. He played the camera back. In the video, Tyler and I were crossing the bridge behind us, at a distance of about 5 meters. That tall man with the orange rescue vest was walking with quiet steps. The camera quality was good enough, but strangely, his face was still not visible. It was as if the lens couldn't capture that part. We weren't turning around to look back. We had never felt him coming. The police investigated the video. A few days later, they called me. They had managed to enlarge the badge on the orange vest. It was the uniform of a mountain rescue team that went missing in 1998. That rescuer had vanished precisely in that forest 23 years ago, and his body had never been found. About 6 months after the incident, Tyler moved his house. He completely refused to speak about this topic. I was trying to forget everything too, until one night I found an envelope with no sender in my mailbox. Inside was only one photo. The picture had been taken from the security camera, me, Tyler, and the man in the orange vest. But this time there was a difference in the photo. He wasn't the only one behind us. Among the trees along the edge of the trail stood dozens of faceless people. They were all looking at us. And on the back of the photo, only one sentence was written: "You chose the right trail this time." Since that day, I never break one rule. If I see a trail in the mountains or the forest that does not appear on the map, no matter how interesting it looks, I do not take a single step onto it. Because sometimes, some paths don't get lost. They just wait for the next person to choose them. People think that old fire lookout towers located on mountain peaks are just abandoned buildings. I used to think so too, until my friend Ben and I decided to spend the night in one such tower. The most terrifying part wasn't the strange noises or the creaking of the old structure. The most terrifying moment was experienced when I opened the logbook at the top of the tower. Because when I read the last entry, the date belonged to a day that hadn't come yet. And my full name was written in that entry. My name is Jacob Miller. This incident took place in November 2022 in the state of Oregon. My closest friend Ben and I had been exploring abandoned places for many years. We always followed safety rules and did not enter illegal areas. One day, we saw a post on an internet forum about an old, decommissioned fire lookout tower. According to what was written, the tower had been closed years ago, and the number of people going there was very small. We set off early in the morning. After a hike of about 5 hours, we reached the peak of the mountain. The tower wasn't as old as it appeared from afar. Its wood was weathered, but it still looked sturdy. When entering inside, the first thing that caught my attention was the lack of dust. It was as if someone had cleaned it recently. Ben took this jokingly and said that maybe other hikers also use this place as a shelter. We explored the surroundings until sunset, filmed a few videos, and decided to spend the night in the upper room of the tower. After it grew dark, the wind picked up. The tower slowly began to creak. This was normal, but at about 11 o'clock at night, from the lower floor, we heard footsteps climbing up the wooden stairs. Thud, thud, thud. Ben thought it was another hiker. As for me, I took the flashlight and looked down the stairwell. No one was visible, but the footsteps didn't stop. On the contrary, they continued to approach us slowly. Ben also approached the stairwell and looked down. The light of the flashlight illuminated the wooden steps one by one. The first floor, then the entrance area appeared. The door was still in the condition we had locked it from the inside. There was no human, but the footsteps continued. And the interesting thing was that the sounds perfectly matched the creaking of the wood. It was as if an invisible someone was truly climbing the steps. We held our breath and began to listen. The sounds came all the way to the last step. Then they stopped suddenly. I shone the flashlight on the last step. There was nothing. Ben said in a low voice, "Maybe it's the wind." I didn't answer because the wind wouldn't walk up the steps. A few minutes later, we decided to occupy ourselves. In the corner of the room stood an old wooden table. On top of it sat rusted binoculars, an old map, and a thick notebook. On the cover of the notebook, it was written in large letters, "Lookout Logbook." Ben opened it. The first pages belonged to the 1980s. The watchman had recorded the weather conditions. Then the pages continued through the years. The very last entry belonged to the year 2017. It was written there, "The tower officially closes as of today." Smiled. So no one has come since then. I turned to the next page. There was a new inscription. The ink still looked dark. The date, November 18, 2022. My breath caught. This was tomorrow's date. Ben was frozen in place too. We began to read the text. Tonight, 2 people will arrive. Of them will be Jacob. The other's name will be Ben. Laughed nervously. Someone is trying to scare us. But I was reading the continuation of the text. At 02:17, they will hear the staircase noises for the first time. I immediately looked at my wristwatch. The time was 02:16. A second later, footsteps came from the lower floor again. Thud, thud, thud. Ben looked at his watch too. Both of our faces went white because the time written in the notebook had turned out to be correct down to the second. I hastily read the next sentence. Jacob will look down. Ben will stand behind him. I involuntarily looked down the stairwell. Ben was behind me too, just as it was written. My hands began to shake. I didn't want to read the last sentence, but my eyes lowered by themselves. It was written there. Now the third person has also reached the top. The moment I read the last sentence, I dropped the notebook from my hand. The sound of the notebook hitting the old wooden floor echoed strangely in the room. Ben immediately turned around. I also instinctively looked down the stairwell. No one was there again, but the footsteps were no longer heard. This silence was more terrifying. It was as if something had truly reached the last step and was now holding its breath, watching us. Ben whispered that we must go down immediately and leave the tower. I agreed. We took our backpacks and approached the stairs. I was about to take the first step when a faint sound, resembling the static of an old radio, came from the lower floor. There was no electricity in the tower. No device should have been working. Despite this, the static continued for a few seconds, and then a low male voice was heard. "Go back." Voice was very faint. It was as if it came from inside a speaker that hadn't worked for years. Ben pushed me forward. "We're going down." We began descending the steps. When we reached the first turn, I froze on the steps. There were fresh mud tracks. The tracks climbed from the bottom up, but only up to 2 steps. Then they vanished suddenly, as if someone had lifted into the air upon reaching the second floor. The moment Ben saw this, he began descending faster. I followed after him. When we reached the entrance door, we saw that the door was open, even though we had locked it from the inside when going up. The wind was swinging the door slowly. We were about to step outside when Ben stopped suddenly and looked at me. "Jacob, what happened?" "The notebook." "What notebook?" "We left it upstairs." I raised my head and looked at the window of the top floor. The old logbook was now standing open in front of the window, even though there was no wind. Its pages were turning by themselves. When it stopped on a page, new words began to appear with black ink, as if someone invisible was writing at that exact moment. Even though I was far away, I could read it. "They are already trying to leave." Then a new sentence was written. "But one will be left behind." Saw this too. Saying nothing, he grabbed my arm. Both of us started running from the tower behind us. This time, not just single footsteps, but sounds of 3 people descending the stairs at the same time came. Thud, 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 thud. But when I turned and looked, at the entrance of the tower only one person was standing, and that person was me. When I saw the man standing at the entrance of the tower, my legs felt as if they were glued to the ground. He was the same height as me, wearing the same jacket, and even carried the same tear on his shoulder. The distance between us was about 30 meters, but I could clearly distinguish his face. He was me. The only difference was in his eyes. They looked completely black, and there was neither fear nor excitement on his face. He was just looking at me calmly. Ben grabbed my arm tightly and pulled me forward. When I looked back for the last time, that figure still hadn't moved from his spot. He wasn't following us. He wasn't running. He was just standing. For some reason, this terrified me even more. We ran without stopping for about 40 minutes and finally reached the main route. When I saw other hikers there, I felt safe for the first time. We got into the car and drove away from the mountain. None of us spoke along the way. When we reached the city, the first thing Ben did was check the videos on the camera. Most of the footage we took in the tower had been erased. We opened one of the remaining videos. The video was the moment I was filming the inside of the tower. At first, everything looked normal. Then the camera accidentally turned toward the window. Our reflection was visible in the glass, me, Ben, and a third person between us as the video continued. Ben and I were moving, but the third figure wasn't moving at all. He was just looking at the camera. Ben stopped the video immediately. After that night, we never opened that footage again. A week later, curiosity didn't leave me alone again. I called the National Park Service and asked about that tower. The woman on the other end of the phone remained silent for a long time. Then she said, "The tower didn't close in 2017. I was surprised. "What do you mean?" "Because that tower burned down completely as a result of a lightning strike in 2009. I thought I misheard. I opened the Internet archives. I found the old news story in the picture. Only a burned metal frame remained of the tower. The intact wooden building where we stayed had been destroyed 13 years ago." A few days later, Ben called me. His voice was trembling. He said he found an old notebook in front of his door, that same lookout logbook. I went to his house immediately. We opened the notebook. All the old entries were gone. Only the last page remained. A new date was written there. The date was that very day, and underneath it there was only one sentence: "Thanks for the next shift." We looked at each other. Then we burned the notebook in the stove. The papers turned completely to ash, but the next morning, the notebook was in front of Ben's door again. We never opened it again. 4 years have passed since this incident. I never approach abandoned lookout towers anymore. And when I go on a mountain hike, I always remember one rule: if you find a guest logbook in an old tower, do not open the last page, because sometimes what is written there does not remain from the past. They are waiting for events that haven't happened yet.